Welcome to the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, a show created to help painting company owners build a thriving painting business that does well over $1 million in annual revenue. I'm your host, Brandon Pierpont, founder of Painter Marketing Pros and creator of the popular PCA educational series, Learn, Do, Grow, Marketing for Painters. In each episode, I'll be sharing proven tips, strategies, and processes from leading experts in the industry on how they found success in their painting business. We will be interviewing owners of the most successful painting companies in North America and learning from their experiences. On this episode of the Industry Partners series of the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, we have Benji Carlson of Breakthrough Academy. Benji is the head of content at BTA. Benji, thanks for joining us today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brandon. It's an honor.
Absolutely, man. So I've heard a lot about BTA. You know, you guys, we travel in the same circles. I've heard very, very positive things. So I'm super excited. We're finally making this connection. I don't think you and I actually met in person at Expo last year. We'll fix that this year. But yeah, I'm excited we're shooting this, man.
Yeah, me too.
So tell me, as we get started, tell me, I guess, a little bit about you, your background, and kind of how you got involved at BTA.
So I started in the painting industry. I was a College Pro Painters franchisee, was really successful with that for about 5 years through university. After I dropped out of school for the third time and didn't go back, I was like looking for other stuff. I was wanting to get out of painting. Actually, it wasn't so much that I was wanting to get out of painting. I just had heard of this Breakthrough Academy thing being started at the time. This would have been back in 2015 by a couple friends of mine. And I was like, that's a really good idea. You know, this market is huge and it's totally underserved when it comes to like business systems and coaching and the infrastructure needed to scale. And that's kind of, you know, what we do, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, I came from the College Pro world, started with Breakthrough Academy in 2017. And we've been just growing like crazy ever since. So that's kind of how I come to this world.
Yeah. So you said that you dropped out of school 3 times?
Yeah.
You kept going back, huh?
I kept going back. I just kept thinking, I think I kept expecting there to be more than there was. And then I finally was sitting in like a supply chain management course with someone who clearly had failed in business. And was like, I don't know what, like, I'm just going to go sell a paint job because I think I'd make more and learn more there than I am in this classroom. And I honestly never went back. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah. School
hard knocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
So let's get into Breakthrough Academy. What is it?
Okay. We systemize contracting businesses for growth. That's our tagline.
That's concise.
Now,
I love it.
So let me unpack that. You know, we are, I guess you could say we're a coaching business, but we hate the word coaching because many coaches are jokers and clowns, and they'll take your hard-earned money and give you crappy advice. And then 6 months later, you call us and you say, anyway, I'm very jaded with respect to the word. I've got some PTSD around the word coaching, but I use that because it at least gives someone a bit of a comparison. Now, really what this is, a better way to describe it is like a franchise system without all the lousy aspects of a franchise. And there are many, if you want to get into them. We offer the coaching, the content, and the community, I would say at a higher level than a franchisor would give you, but you retain control over your company. You're not giving us crazy royalties in perpetuity. You keep your brand, it's your business, you pay us a fee, and we provide you with the support, the content, all the systems needed to basically go from let's say about $1 million a year business to $5 million a year to $10 million a year and beyond, if that's what you desire. But we focus on the operational side of the business. Like, we help implement the behind the scenes, not so sexy systems that you're not really thinking about when you start your business, but then you hit a certain point and you're like, holy crap, I really need better financial controls. I really need to implement employment agreements and job descriptions for everyone so they know what they're doing. I need to build SOPs. I need to create an onboarding system, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. There's all these things that when it's just you and a helper, you're like, man, they're not really on your radar. But when you're hitting, let's say, approaching $1 million a year, 1.5 million a year, it becomes abundantly clear that that's indeed what you need. And so we help entrepreneurs in painting, but a few other industries as well, inject their business with the infrastructure it needs to scale to the goal that they have in their mind's eye. So
Okay.
was that a good description? Did I miss anything?
I think it was great, man. I want to make sure I'm
Yeah.
crystal clear here. So for you guys, you really start working with companies when they're at around 1 million in revenue. Is that right?
Yeah, our lower threshold would be like, let's say as low as about $750,000 a year in size. And that's not because this is some elitist or snobby group. It's literally just because when you get to that size is when what we teach makes sense and it becomes more affordable. So we have a lot of free content that we deliver to smaller businesses. We'd happily connect with them and kind of like build a bit of a relationship so that when they grow into us, we're there waiting and ready. But by and large, the 98% of our businesses are between $1 and $15 million a year in revenue.
Okay. 1 to 15. Yeah. So if you're at 1, you want to get to 15, you guys are the guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if you want to get to 5, we're the guys. We want to get to 7. The number is totally arbitrary and that's up to you, but we'll just kind of help you put the systems in place to do it.
I love it. So I know you had said it's an underserved market. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit. What was the main motivator behind BTA? What was kind of the aha moment that led to that?
Well, we want to transform honest, hardworking contractors into truly thriving entrepreneurs. Okay. Like I believe that trades and construction and home services are essential. There's no part of sort of the Western world, North American society that we all enjoy really functions without them. I don't think they get a ton of credit for doing, dirty work behind the scenes. And that's fine. It's not all about the credit, but I do think that this little niche, and it's a huge part of the global economy, huge, is hasn't until very recently hasn't been equipped with the systems and tools needed to run the businesses they want. And as a result, it's been kind of fragmented and stuck a decade behind. But that's all changing very, very quickly, which I know you want to dive into later, talking about the future of this space. That's all changing very quickly. I'd like to think that we're kind of at the forefront of it. With lots of other players in this space, but that's kind of why we do what we do. We want to make contracting cool again, and we want to put more dollars and more free time into the hardworking entrepreneurs behind these businesses.
Yeah, I love your focus on taking hardworking contractors and really turning them into entrepreneurs. So I think that shift is a serious one, and I think a lot, many people in the industry don't really recognize maybe even the difference between those things sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do want to get into the painting industry. So one of the things I love about talking with people like you, from some of the best industry partners that we have is you guys have insights. So you have insights working with all these different painting companies. Are you guys just in North America? Are you guys elsewhere as well?
It's just North America. It's Canada and US, but I believe we have members in every state and province, with the exception of maybe a couple. But we have clients all over North America. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you guys are working with these painting companies all across North America, which means that you have access to data and to knowledge that very few people have. Right? I've had a lot of highly successful painting company owners come on the show, but they can only really present their experience, right? Or the people that they know. You have a unique scenario here. So I want to start with the mistakes first, because you see these mistakes, you repeat these mistakes. And I think one of the best things about learning from mentors or education like this is avoid mistakes that other people make. So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see painting company owners make?
Well, I mean, there's lots of mistakes that people make, and I also would just preface this by saying, like, mistakes are a good thing. Mistakes are how you learn. Making mistakes is not bad. It's very healthy. So I don't want to, publicly shame mistake making. But I can maybe speak to some common patterns. I'll tell you one that is not going to surprise you is like a total lack of focus on financial controls.
Yeah.
People sell jobs and produce jobs and basically cross their fingers and basically go on a hope and a prayer that everything will even out in the wash. And sometimes it does, but lots of times it doesn't. And if you don't have an ability to see what's going on within your business that's driving or hurting profitability, that's a big problem. To click in on that even more, to just be like super specific for painters, like when I say financial controls, especially when you're starting out, like just like get really good and rhythmical about job costing. You estimate a project with a certain baked in gross profit that you're trying to achieve. If you're not reality checking how the project actually did 6 weeks later, 2 months later, whatever the cycle you decide it should be, if you're not reality checking how you did against that estimate and those are way off, you can be working for free for many, many years. So I'd say dialing in on job costing is sort of a good cornerstone or a good starting point to building out strong financial controls. Another really common one I think about is like holding on to sales too long. Nobody can sell the way I sell. Nobody can sell this business, this job. It's like, no, plenty, like lots of people can. You're good at it, but like you're not world class, and salespeople are not these, impossible unicorns that you think they are. You just need to like standardize the process, build a consultative selling process, get a good CRM in place, build some good sales and marketing collateral, and set someone else to do it. Because I was saying this to someone the other day. I'm like you have a more important job, which is to be the CEO of your company and not like the part-time sales guy, part-time job site manager, part-time administrator. And so if you want to, run a big boy business or a big girl business, you need to treat it as such. And getting out of sales, I think is if you can do it early, you're better off. A lot of people hold on to it way too long. Other simple stuff, like people overspend on paint and sundries, but they underspend on labor, meaning like people they'll be like cheapskates about hourly wage, when it's like, in my experience, you do get what you pay for. And if you find someone really good and they want a few bucks more, like those are dollars well spent. Wasting money on an extra pail because you were too lazy to do the estimating and figure out how much it was going to take, that really, really hurts. And if you look at your numbers at the end of if you've ever spent too much on paint like I have, you're like, wow, I cannot believe how much I just put in the landfill. And basically I could have kept those dollars. I don't know. Those probably the big ones. Another one would be like trying to grow without investing in a good brand package. Like, don't run ads to a really crappy website because you're just amplifying noise. There's so many things, man. But I think that those would be like some big obvious ones that we see.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I'm curious as to, you really focus on sales. People hold on to sales too long. Is that because that's just what you see? Like that's just the position that people tend to not want to give up? Or is there something specific about that sales position that they should try to give that up sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I mean, like that, so that is what we see, like from talking, like from the 550 businesses that we're actively working with, and then the thousands more that are kind of in alumni status. Like that is just a broad aggregate perspective that we have. Why is that? Well, I think that people are terrified to take off the proverbial sales hat because it's a very leveraged role. So giving it away, if someone is genuinely estimating and selling on your behalf and making promises that your production team has to go fulfill, it is an important role. I don't want to diminish it and say like, oh, you don't need, like, this isn't a big deal. It is a big deal. I'm just saying don't let that fear be so paramount to you that you stop yourself from filling that seat on your organizational chart. I think as well, there's just like some ego stuff, like people kind of like the dopamine hit from closing a deal. And like when you give that up,
ABC, always be closing. Right?
yeah, exactly. And like
Wolf of Wall
I
Street
think
kind
that
of
if
stuff out
you
here.
it totally, and if you found success for 3 years or 5 years selling yourself, it's just a habitual thing that's hard to change.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, man. And I think a lot of there's a big almost identity crisis that can occur.
That's what
People
I'm
are their
saying.
business. There's no disconnect. It's the same thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it, man. So one of the really, really awesome things about Breakthrough Academy, which is something that I find really interesting, is you guys don't work just with painting companies, but you work with all kinds of contractors. And the reason I find that really interesting is because I think I love the painting industry because I think the opportunity is just incredible here, right? I think it's in some ways beyond or less competitive, more ripe for disruption than, let's say, plumbing or HVAC or roofing, because oftentimes they're a little bit farther ahead in terms of their marketing, in terms of sometimes how professional they are. So I'm curious, how do you think that the painting industry compares to these other home service industries right now?
Um, I guess from our like very broad perspective, like we are business systemizers. So from our vantage point, the differences are not as much as you think. Like we look at them as little business entities that have certain inputs that create certain outputs, and there's certain KPIs that you track which tell you, what needs to be fixed and what's broken and etc. So like from our perspective, we definitely look at these little business organisms from a bit more of a scientific and a bit more like calculated lens.
Sounds like it. It's like a
Now, having
lab.
said that, what's that?
It's like a lab. You got mathematical equations and a little
Yeah,
this, little that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit more like colder of an analysis, or like a bit, the business is the business. And now, having said that, we can kind of zoom in and talk a little bit a bit more about the pros and cons of each, because I do think that there are, while I say what I just said, I do think that there are a few, advantages and disadvantages that they all have.
Sure. Yeah. Let's get into that.
So with painting in particular, I think one of the big challenges is if you're in Canada or northern parts of the US, the seasonality of exterior work is really challenging. And you'll hear this a lot with businesses that are just starting out. They've got big cash flow issues from November to March, maybe later. They lose part of their staff sometimes because they can't keep them employed. People in Miami and Texas and Southern California have it easy on this front, but definitely the seasonality of exterior work, depending on your geography, can be really hard. The other thing that I would say too about painting is I think due in large part to a fairly low barrier to entry. And then I also think in large part due to these big like student painting franchises, like the one I came from, College Pro, but there's Student Works, there's University First Class. I mean, there's hundreds of them at this point. I think that has funneled a lot of entrepreneurs into the painting space. And so everybody will say their space is competitive, and they are, but painting in particular is a very busy market. Having said that, I don't know if painters realize this compared to other industries. Like you guys have the healthiest, the best gross profit percentage compared to roofing, compared to construction, way better than renovations, way better than landscaping. So there's your ability to price and create a healthy gross profit margin is something that is uniquely good for painting. Not everyone enjoys that. And the other thing that I think that I really like about painting is it is relatively simple. Like, like when you think about the complexity that's like a GC, like a general contractor has to deal with, where there's a very extensive design process. They may need to work with engineers, they need to pull permits. They're working with highly paid project managers and interior designers. They got to deal with the city. Like there's all sorts of stuff. The scope of the projects are hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars. These are like really big, sophisticated, challenging projects that require way more systemization on the side of the business. And I think that painting doesn't have to deal with that as much. So they're simpler. I'm not saying that they're simple. They are simpler than some of the
Yeah.
other ones. And as a result, I think it's easier to get your head around it.
Yeah, I love, yeah, relatively speaking, simpler. So I want to kind of get into this margins idea then with you, because again, this is your guys'
Sure.
business. You know, you make painting companies healthy, you help them scale, you tell them what they need to do and how to do it. You said that they have the healthiest, highest gross profit percentage of all these contracting businesses. What do you think a painting company should have in terms of gross profit? And what do you think they should have in terms of net profit? And then maybe we can just, obviously it's going to vary based on the structure of the company, but maybe just a brief look into, let's say, a 1 or 2 or 3 or even a $5 million company. What would the overhead likely look like? I know
Sure.
that's somewhat of a loaded question there, but I'm curious.
Okay, so let's start with let's just do residential.
Okay.
Um, we can talk about commercial if you want. Well, and you know, by the way, people are gonna gasp and be appalled when I say
Here's
this.
where you
Like,
get the
that's
hate
not true.
mail. Here's where you get all the
What
messages. Yeah.
they'll be like, we can't do that. That's not possible. I'm like, okay, I'm just telling you what we see with our members. So when it comes to gross profit margin, okay, anything below a 40% GP, we would consider needs work. Like that's not, it's, you know, it's not great. Anything from like 42 to 47% gross profit, we would say that's solid.
Okay.
And then anything north of 47, so 47, 50, 55, we have guys that are north of 55%
Wow.
GP that we call that like exceptional or world class.
Yeah, that's
So
crazy.
if your gross profit right now is 32%, you know, that should be an alarm bell, something to do with your estimating process, something to do with your production process, something to do with the way you order materials, something in that system that can be dramatically improved. And then your net profit, like what does that trickle down to? Anything below 15% net, we would consider needs work. 15 to 20, we would say is solid. And then anything above 20 is like exceptional. You're really making good money. Commercial side, it's really, really similar.
Yep.
The net is a little bit lower. So I just like take all those same numbers for GP, and then your net would be a bit lower because generally speaking, you have a little bit more overhead to run those projects. They're a little bit more price sensitive because they're businesses. There's a few factors in that, but they're very, very similar between the two. What was the second part of the question? What the overhead looks like?
Yep. Yeah. Basically, after you talk about net profit percentage, you know, we're going from, let's say it's 45% down to 15%. Where's that 30%? Where should that be attributed to?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll talk in broad strokes because you get too technical and then people start disagreeing about what is actually considered overhead versus what
Sure.
is not. So let me just make this really simple. Okay. Where should that 30% in overhead go? As far as people, I would say like a really, really strong office manager is money well spent. You can hire a good office manager earlier than you think because lots of them will do part-time. And then you can scale them up to full-time as your business grows. So really, really good office manager and like admin support. I would say a really good CRM and tech stack is another good, like those are dollars well spent. So whether that's drip jobs or jobber or work glue or, you know, there'd be a handful in Paint Scout, whatever, although I think that's more for estimating. A good salesperson, and somebody might debate, well, depending on how they're paid, that's actually packed into variable costs or whatever. I would just say your team should have a good salesperson early on, especially around like $750 to $1 million a year, getting a good salesperson in place. And much later on, once those sort of like facilities, once those people are maxed, you could talk about production managers or operations managers or GMs. Beyond that, I'm like, spend some good money on your branding and your marketing. And I think that's like a good, healthy mix of overhead spends early on. When you get to bigger businesses, it gets a lot more complicated. But I think those are probably pretty safe bets for your audience.
Yeah, no, that's a great breakdown, man. I appreciate that. So when someone's listening and let's say they're at that 32%, when you said, okay, if you're at 32%, you hear this, that should be kind of an alarm bell for you, because your gross profit should not be that low. What in your experience would, again, there are a lot of factors, but is it typically that they're not charging enough? Or is it usually, okay, they're charging enough, but their production costs are just way out of control?
It's usually a bit of both. By the way, now is a great time to raise your prices. Spotify's doing it, Netflix is doing it, you know, your bank is doing it. Might as well go with the
Everybody's doing
crowd.
it. Yeah, hop on.
So now is a great time to do that if you haven't already. And then yeah, I think most operational efficiency is difficult. Getting like motivated and tenacious painters who aren't just kind of like, you know, trundling around the job site is difficult. Getting people to follow SOPs so that the production process is methodical. You know, getting people to be thorough so you're not spending an extra day and a half doing quality control because the client pointed out a bunch of stuff. I mean, if you're listening to this, you know the things that kill your business when it comes to like productivity. Go fix those. The solutions are not as complicated as you think. I know you're busy and I know it takes time, but like that, if you want to play the entrepreneurial game, working on your business rather than in your business is obviously something you want to do. And so I'd say it's usually a mix of both, but it would come down to like how you're pricing via your estimates, and then like very zoomed in on like job site efficiency, like what's going on that site between the crew lead and the painters and the customer communication to get projects, you know, on and off the schedule as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I love your focus. If you're listening to this, you probably already know something, right? People tend to procrastinate. They think like it's great. It's a great step to listen to the podcast, great step to get educated, but you also need to take action. Don't have paralysis by analysis. One step in the right direction. So I want to, I love the fact that you guys give away stuff for free. There's a podcaster I follow, Alex Ramosi. You're probably familiar with him. I love him, but he gives away a lot of free stuff. And you guys give the stuff away for free. You help the businesses sort of get to a point where it might make sense, and then maybe they may or may not want to work with you, right? Because they've already benefited. They see that you know what you're doing. So it's kind of along that same vein. I'd like to focus on the Pareto Principle, you know, the 80-20 rule. For people who are listening, painting company owners who are listening, who haven't yet partnered with BTA, maybe they're not even at the point where financially it would make sense for them to partner with you guys. What would it be likely that they should take away and take a hard look at right now? You've talked about a few things, but what are the things like, hey, 80-20, if you're at 500,000 or so, you probably need to go ahead and look at this right now and make sure it's okay.
I think the first problem that you want to create for yourself, and I realize that sentence sounds weird, but
it does.
But hang in there. The first problem you want to create for yourself is a demand glut, meaning you can you can market and sell more work than you're able to produce, which is a problem. And it's a big one, but it's a really good problem to have because you've kind of looked after the thing which cripples 70% of contractors when they start out, which is just getting the phone to ring. So figure out your lead sources that work, figure out a sales process that works, get your closing ratio to be 40% or higher. Like just get that part of your business. And I realize there's a lot there, but like get that figured out first so that you have more work coming at you than you can handle. Then you would connect with Breakthrough Academy and we will help, you know, really deck out your operational systems and your production capacity so you can get through that work and more with ease, or not ease, but relative ease compared to where you might have been before. The other stuff that I think is really fundamental to success, Brandon, is, and I know everyone's heard this before, and this is like kind of a tired message, but just like take care of your diet, sleep, and exercise. Like being in business is a grind, and it is a demand on your internal motor, your physical body, your emotional body, your spiritual body. Like these are things that it needs to be maintained. So I'm a big fan of like having your rhythms and rituals dialed in for yourself, right? Like for me, and by the way, this isn't like you don't need to get up at 3:30 in the morning and meditate for 4 hours and journal for 2. like, and then
Yeah.
take like 6 ice baths and then be like, get a grip. Like, I'm not one of those people, but have a routine to your day, have forms of exercise that work for you. Make sure that you have a good, healthy sleep hygiene. Try to eat food that's good for you, because usually what takes people out of business is just like complete and total burnout and exhaustion. And the best defense to that is like healthy rhythms and rituals. The other thing, when you say like what's like 80-20, like get really good at priority management. The one thing that everyone has in common, the great equalizer, is time, right? We all have 168 hours in the week. It's the one resource you can't get more of. So what you'll notice with high performers is they're quite religious. They're pedantic about the way that they manage their schedule, and their small picture, meaning what they do in like days and weeks, is highly, highly connected with their big picture, meaning where they want to be in years or decades. There's a logical link between those things. So there's lots of business owners who have the big picture figured out, what we call dreamers or wantrepreneurs, like people who talk the talk, and then you look at their actual activity and they're spending it on stuff that has zero correlation, isn't driving them towards that at all. They might be working hard, they might be busy, they might be stressed out, but they're working on the wrong things because they don't understand priority management. So I think like learning to say no to the small stuff and kind of the noise, while focusing on what leads you to that greener pasture that you have in your mind's eye, is really fundamental as well. And we teach a ton on that in Breakthrough Academy. There's free webinars that we do and blogs and all sorts of content you can consume on that specific skill. But I think diet, sleep, and exercise, and get good at priority management, because time is the great equalizer.
Yeah, I love it, man. Have that vision, but then work toward it in a strategic manner, and don't get burned out and bury yourself in the process, because then you don't get there. Okay. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I'm all about the marketing, the growth. I love that stuff. So what are some of the most effective marketing strategies you've seen in the painting industry? Obviously, getting from 1 million to 15 million, you're probably doing some form of marketing. So in your experience, what has worked the best?
Well, it's different for different. I mean, is there like what best for who? Best for a small business, a big business? Like what?
However you want to answer it. So if there are different tranches, let's say, okay, if you're at 1 million, we find that this works really well. Maybe it varies by location, right?
Okay.
If you're in the Northeast, we find this works really well. Kind of however you want to segment that.
Okay, let's just make it really simple. Let's say like smaller businesses and bigger businesses, and we'll just give 2 categories. For smaller businesses, you have a really limited marketing budget. It's gonna be simple stuff, right? It's gonna be like job site marketing. So a really good like sign and flyer program around the projects that you're doing residentially. Some good door knocking. Like, I know people are gonna poo-poo that, but like door to door still works, especially for painting.
Yep.
I would hold tension to reviews. So like your job site manager, or you, whoever is doing it, ideally not you, is trained to make sure that on the exit and close out of a job, when a check is cut, that a review is being posted to Google, because that's free as long as you did a good job. And it's really, really good for your SEO and your searchability. And then I would say optimizing your Google business page. That's like a SEO layup. It's a very, very cheap. You would know more about this than I would, but that's a very cheap and inexpensive and doesn't take long to just help you with your ranking. When we get into bigger businesses, it really it gets a lot more complicated. Like you're usually working on some level of brand building. You're creating a beautiful logo, beautiful website. You're working on brand voice and how copy is written, and you're creating content that is disseminated out there on the interwebs for people to find. You're probably running paid ads to it. And you get into managing campaigns, and it all gets a little bit more sophisticated and expensive. But I would say that's and you'd also be spending a lot on SEO, because you're going to want to be on the first page of Google. So like I think for your listeners, like I'd stick with that low hanging fruit, and if you're not doing that, start there. And the ball will begin to roll, and you'll start to have fun with it. And then these newer, maybe more more sophisticated marketing tactics will become available to you in time. But one thing I would not recommend is going and spending a pile of money on stuff that you don't fully understand and your business isn't ready for. If your website sucks, don't go run paid ads to it. You know what I mean? If your brand
Yeah,
is
it's not
ugly,
going to convert
don't go
well.
amplify it with a whole bunch of ads. Like I just like
Yeah,
do the
have
fundamental
some
stuff
idea of
first.
what's going on when you pay for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marketers are I'm not talking about you, but you know what I'm talking about. Marketers can be
Marketers
a
are a
shicey
slippery group,
bunch.
man.
They'll be happy to take your money
Happy to.
and spend it
Yeah.
and give you not a whole bunch in return, and contractors kind of get duped by that all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, the marketing industry is a shady world. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I've been screwed a number of times myself, and I'm in the industry, so that's how dicey it is.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, you worked. I think you said you work with companies in just about every state and province up in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
What have you found, or have you found anything to help combat winter slow season to kind of, I know you mentioned that these smaller ones will take a huge dive. What do you recommend to take less of a huge dive?
The simplest one would be to market, sell, and schedule all your interior work to happen during the winter. So you're trying to manage the schedule. If somebody wants an interior job done in September, can you diplomatically sell them into the idea of doing it in December when you're going to be slow? So that would be like the simple thing would be to try to push your interior schedule to happen in the winter months.
Mhm.
For more senior businesses, it's generally adding another service. And,
Yeah.
like Christmas lights, for instance, is a really popular one for painters because you already have the infrastructure. You have the ladders or the boom lifts or whatever you need to do it. And so you're basically just you're kind of retooling your production crews to do Christmas lights rather than painting in the winter. So it's a lot of our sort of Canadian and businesses that operate in a cold climate will have that sort of shoulder season and off season side hustle that they do with their skeleton crew, and then they scale back up for the busy season.
How do you feel about the idea of offering discounts to people who want an interior in the summer and you push it out?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I don't it depends on how much, and it depends on why, and it depends, can you, in all honesty, Brandon, can you like pad your estimating a little bit so you're not taking the 10% straight off that healthy GP that you should be getting? Is there a way to maybe do some clever estimating with whatever add-ons and upsells so that by the time you actually get the discount, you're not making 10% less? I think that's your job to maneuver your way through that as a business owner. I don't think it's the worst idea. Any incentive that you can provide to push someone to be scheduled when you want them scheduled and suits your business better, I think is worth investigating.
Yeah. Yeah. I know there's a big debate there, whether give a discount or not, or okay, if you give a discount, well, should you pad it or is that unethical? But I think at the end of the day, what you just explained, you have to really fundamentally understand your sales and marketing process really well and your numbers really well. Otherwise, you don't even really understand what discount you're giving because you don't even know what your margins are.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I'm not necessarily against it. It just depends on the business and what works for your market.
Yeah. Do you find, and again, I know I kind of keep hammering this, but again, you work with all these different companies and they're a pretty wide range of revenue. Do you find that there are sort of certain tranches? Like, okay, I know you guys, you really start well at $1 million, but sometimes you'll be fine at 750,000. So I assume that's kind of your first tranche, and probably below that's another tranche. How about above that?
Yeah, we totally see that whole concept of tranches rings true for me. Yeah, like there's kind of smaller businesses, there's medium businesses, and then there's bigger businesses, and the challenges and the things that they're working on at those different stages are really similar. And so that's just kind of like the progression of think about it like Pokemon. You know what I mean? Like where the businesses are evolving from one stage to the next. You go to like Charmander to Charmeleon to Charizard, like that, the businesses kind of evolve the same way. And the stuff that the owner is thinking about to put this a different way, the stuff a painting business owner at $4 million a year is actually more similar to what a roofing business is thinking about at that stage than another painting business would be when they're much smaller. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. What would you, I guess, so under 750, we'll call it tranche one, right? And there's obviously probably a couple different phases there. Where would you say tranche two begins?
Yeah, it's very different. It's like industry to industry, it's very different. I would say like tranche one for painting would be like getting to the $1 million a year mark.
Okay.
And then I would sort of say 1 to 2.5 is another like zone or another tranche. And then north of 2.5 would be like the bigger business category.
Okay. I love that. And where does the overhead, right? When you start to kind of build out more of this team, would that be then in tranche two, that 1 to 2.5 million? That's where you need to be building that out.
That would be when you're starting to spend a little bit. Your overhead, you're still going to have overhead below $1 million a year, but it just becomes a lot more substantial when you're hiring a full-time office manager. You want to get an estimator. You're spending, some money on someone to do some marketing stuff for you part-time. You're spending money on a tech stack. I mean, yeah, like the expenses do add up. And so it's pretty common for people to make, they've been working for years to get to $1 million a year, and they hit that threshold and they get past it. And then they're making less than they were before. And I'm like, oh my God, this sucks. What have I done? But that's just all part of the evolution. You need to kind of, I had this guy on the podcast the other day, Dan Plata. You remember Dan Plata, the Blue Sky Home Services? You'll cross paths with him. He's a great guy. We were talking about business purgatories and like this idea that at different stages you get stuck in purgatory where your business is bigger than it was before, but you're making less money. And so like top line goes up and bottom line goes down, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? Like I've worked so hard to get here, and now it's worse.
It's getting worse.
But his point was like, that's just a natural part because your expenses swell because that's a part of the strategic plan. And so you're spending more before you get to the part where you make more again. And it's just something that does even out. And if you know that they're coming in advance, it helps to be not caught off guard.
Yeah.
Anyway, bit of a tangent there, but yeah, what's
that was super helpful.
Do you want to know about the tranches thing?
No, I mean, that was super, super helpful, man. I think, one of the things that, I mean, for entrepreneurship in general, that can be scary, but for painting specifically, especially, is you don't fully understand what's going to happen. You think, you're running this 500,000 business. Well, that's what it would look like at 5 million too. And, I'm making 100,000 now or 50,000 now. So I'll be making, $1 million then, but you don't actually know how things are going to change. And yeah, I can imagine that's pretty concerning if when you start to hit these levels that you've been sort of dreaming about or aspiring to, and then your financial well-being seems to be getting worse. You start to wonder what you signed up for here.
Yeah. Yeah, so exactly.
I think it's good to know, going into it. What are you seeing? So obviously things last couple of years have been weird to put it lightly, but let's focus, I guess, less on COVID and all that stuff, but just the painting industry in general. Have you seen it evolving over the last, let's say, 5 years? Have you seen it change or not so much?
Yeah, I have seen it change. I think we're seeing the early stages of a very, very big change that will probably take the next 15 to 20 years to kind of fully set in. Obviously, like the onslaught of technologies and softwares available to business owners is remarkable. I was talking to Job Nimbus, big CRM. I think it's mostly focused on roofing and exteriors, but they've got a lot of painters as well. It's a great platform. We had the CEO and founder of it on, named Ben Hodson, really bright guy, and he was telling me, he's like, when we started out, and I think the number he said was like 10 years ago or 12 years ago when they started, not long, like in the 2010s, you know what I mean? Like they're not talking about 1980, not that long ago. He's like, the most sophisticated tool that existed for contractors to store data was like Excel. So if you just think about like how, now it's like you go to a trade show, there's going to be like 20 different people who want to tell you about their platform and their product, which is amazing. And so I just think that we're still on the early stages of that. And what you're going to see is a pretty big gap arise between new school and old school contractors. I think most people know what I mean when I say new school. It's just like tech savvy, excited to adopt technology and evolve. And old school is the classic, stuck in their ways boomer contractor who, is who it sounds doom and gloom, but I think whose days are numbered over the long run. So yeah, man, lots has changed, but lots more will in the future.
What do you think about, I guess, like the fragmentation of the painting market? Obviously, it's highly fragmented. I think there's somewhere, number might be off, but I think there's somewhere in the vicinity of 300,000 painting companies in the US. And from my understanding, 1 or 2 or so % of them are above 1 million. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah.
How many small companies there are.
That's a really interesting conversation. I mean, I have my own take on it, and somebody could make just as compelling an argument in the other direction. But personally, I think that you're going to see a lot of centralization over the next 20 years. I think that there are going to be fewer businesses, and those businesses are going to be much larger. Technology has made that possible. But I think more than that, you're going to see larger businesses take up larger market share, because generally what happens is money looks for new markets, and this construction and trade space is a relatively untapped one. Talking about like investment capital. So when you start to see, big money players start to enter this space, which they have, it just means that more and more will, because they're looking for under-optimized opportunities to make an investment, a return on investment. And I think that this will be a new frontier. So I think that what you'll see is a few people kind of prove the concept. Not that long ago, somebody would have said, there's no way that you can run a home service business that big. And now, like our friend Tommy Mello is going to do north of 200 million this year, and way more planned next year. And you'll see a few like real early adopters and real heavy hitters kind of prove the concept. And then generally what happens is a bunch more follow. So I think you're going to see this fragmented thing go away. I think it's going to be fewer larger businesses. And so our advice and what we're doing with our members is like, be one of those larger businesses. Because they're going to be very well situated over the next 20 years. Homes and home services are not going anywhere. But that lower third or that lower half of kind of like the really old school, really under systemized business owner, there will be far fewer of them in 15 years, in my opinion.
Do you think that when these big companies, come in or become big or whatever it is, do you think this is going to be kind of through internal growth of the company? Do you think they're going to employ more of a roll-up strategy and just swoop up a bunch of painting companies? What do you think it looks like?
At a certain, it's internal growth up until a certain size. I don't know, $50 million a year, maybe more. It's big. Like it's like, like if you're just starting out, don't get excited about going.
Not going to go acquire everybody.
Like get really good at your own thing first, but eventually, you get to a size and scale where like the only option for growth, the most logical option for growth is just to roll them up. So I think you'll start to see that. There will be a Tommy Mello of the painting industry in the next 5 years, and then people go, oh, okay, I see what's possible now, and things will begin to go that way, like it or not. It's my personal take, and if someone made a compelling argument against it, I'd hear it with open ears, but that's kind of what I see coming.
Yeah. So that's really interesting because, one of the things that historically painting business have really struggled with is making their companies sellable, right? This idea of transferring equity, and there's probably a lot of reasons for that. But I guess number one, it's a two-part question. Number one, why do you think painting businesses are usually not the most sellable of businesses? And I guess it would be very related to question number two. Some people who are listening to this might not want to become Tommy Mello of painting, but they might want to be bought by him. How can they start to position their company now to potentially be rolled up in the next 5 or 10 years?
Oh, it's such a great question, man. I think that the first part, like why do so many people okay, so yeah, here's an interesting fact. We had an mergers and acquisitions guy on not long ago, and I asked this exact same question because I just see it so often, and I found out it's rare, it's very rare. I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty, this is the number I remember, less than 1% of businesses in our space will transact for more than $0. Okay, so
That's
1 in 100.
insane.
Yeah. So why is that? Most people don't think, most people don't think about, they make a lot of assumptions. They sort of like assume that they're going to work really hard 20 years, and they're going to put a for sale sign on their business, and it's going to get snapped up to the highest bidder overnight. And that's just not the case. It's a buyer's market in this world. It's not like there are more businesses available than there are people interested in businesses. And so to successfully exit a business in contracting, you need to be really, really, really strategic about it. And it's not something you decide on doing and then 6 months later you've done the deal. It's like a 5 years long or a decade long process. I can relay the information that I've been given on doing this successfully. Number one is systemization, and I'll happily plug Breakthrough Academy here. Like, that is something that we do exceptionally well. A business broker or a potential buyer is looking for systemization of some sort. It doesn't need to be 100% perfect, but if it's a chaotic mess, it's of no value. The other thing they look for is like the predictability of future cash flow. So recurring revenue or like secured long-term contracts with clients. That's a big one. Diversification of products and services. So if you have a few different things that you offer and you don't have all your eggs in one basket, that's very appealing to a buyer. Documentation, stuff like SOPs and employment agreements and policies and manuals, all that stuff that we hate to build. Again, we do that really well at Breakthrough Academy. A very consistent sales and marketing program. It's like a strong brand. And like, you don't have these large spikes and these large drop-offs. Like, your sales and marketing is very methodical and consistent. And the last one that I would say is like a good, strong growth trajectory. So is something that a lot of people will do when they know they're going to sell in the next 3 years. They'll basically really hit the gas pedal down on marketing and sales. So the graph is showing growth, and they'll also, in very strategic ways, cut back on their overhead. So they're posting really healthy and really appetizing net profit numbers. It's kind of the same idea as like when you're selling your house, you paint the exterior and you get it immaculately clean. There's a few things that you can do to really like boost its value. But anyway, I'm getting kind of far down the rabbit hole. There's a lot of stuff that you can do to make your business more appealing to a buyer. And if that's something that you plan on doing, you need to be thinking about it now, because this sort of assumption that it's just going to be worth a bunch one day because you've worked hard at it is, unfortunately, and in some cases very sadly, it's just not the case.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone who's listening who thinks that, Breakthrough Academy might be a good fit for them, what would the next step for them be?
They would go to our website, which is www.btacademy.com. They would click on the button that says book a call or talk to us. It's a few different large orange, I think they're orange, buttons on our site. Will just take you to a landing page where you can schedule a meeting with us. We are like, I should say this right now, like, we are almost at capacity right now. So we will, we'll get in touch. We may not have room right this second. We're very blessed to kind of have the luxury of being very like picky with who we take on and when we take them on. So, we will get in touch with you. It might be a month or two before we have room to onboard. But our website would be a great place to start. The other thing I should mention, I should have said it earlier, is we'll also make available just this really cool training checklist kind of SOP thing that's a fill in the blanks. We call them contractor quick tools. So that's just like a free thing we'll leave behind if people want to grab something for free and play around with it. It's a really great way to start organizing your job site and getting it a little bit more efficient. But website's a great place to start. follow us on Instagram at BT Academy. You can check out the podcast. It's called Contract Revolution, and it releases on all platforms every Wednesday. It's pretty easy to follow us along. And if people do want to reach out and talk to us directly, the form on the website is the best place to do that.
I love it, man. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up? Any other advice you have for painting company owners? Really anything before we close down here?
Any final advice? Work on your business, not in your business. Believe that you can do it. Be really, really focused on your numbers and your time, and have faith that sooner or later things are going to start to pay off, and they will. I think that that's advice that I wish I had when I was kind of stuck in the trenches and suffering through the painful onslaught of, grassroots entrepreneurship. So those would be my closing thoughts, Brandon.
Yeah, I love that, man. It is a grind, right? It is a grind.
Yeah.
You're not alone. Benji, thank you, brother. This was awesome. Really glad that we made this happen. And I'm excited to see you. I think this will air a week before Expo. So I'm excited to see you next week, man.
Happy to see you there, man. It'll be fun.
Let's see you, brother. If you want to learn more about the topics we discussed in this podcast and how you can use them to grow your painting business, visit paintermarketingpros.com/podcast for free training, as well as the ability to schedule a personalized strategy session for your painting company. Again, that URL is paintermarketingpros.com/podcast.
Hey there, painting company owners. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we did. And also, if you're interested in taking your painting business to the next level, make sure you visit the Painter Marketing Pros website at paintermarketingpros.com to learn more about our services. You can also reach out to me directly by emailing me at brandon@paintermarketingpros.com, and I can give you personalized advice on growing your painting business. Until next time, keep growing.